The Scotland Yard Archive, under reference MEPOL2/10138, holds a document dated November 10, 1974. It is a report from the forensic laboratory detailing the inspection of an abandoned Ford Corsair with the license plate XYO418S, found on the coast in Newhaven. The report states that traces of biological fluids matching blood groups A and B were found on the front seat and in the boot, along with a section of lead pipe, 26 millimeters in diameter, wrapped in surgical tape. This physical artifact became the starting point for the investigation of a case that demonstrated the inner workings of the closed institutions of the British aristocracy. Before we proceed to a detailed analysis of the documents, interrogation transcripts, and financial reports that confirm the systemic nature of this precedent, we ask you to subscribe to our channel. Your subscription will allow us to continue working with archival sources and release new analytical materials based exclusively on documentary accuracy and the critique of historical evidence. Click the subscribe button to support the channel's development. To understand the institutional environment that created the conditions for the events of November 7, 1974, it is necessary to analyze the socio-economic structure of Britain in the early 1970s. This period was characterized by a deep systemic crisis, inflation reaching 16% in 1974, and an intensification of class conflicts. Under these conditions, the traditional British aristocracy faced the threat of losing its economic dominance and political influence, which led to the consolidation of elite groups within closed institutions. The main coordination center for this consolidation was the exclusive gambling establishment, the Clermont Club, located at 44 Berkeley Square, London. Founded in 1962, this club functioned not merely as a commercial enterprise, but as a closed hierarchical structure that united members of the high nobility, major financiers, and politicians. The social composition of its members, known as the Clermont set, included individuals who possessed significant administrative and judicial immunity. Key figures among them were Richard John Bingham, the 7th Earl of Lucan, the club's owner, John Aspinall, billionaire James Goldsmith, and other representatives of the House of Lords and the financial oligarchy. An analysis of the club's financial ledgers for 1973 to 1974 shows that significant volumes of unaccounted funds circulated within this structure, used to sustain the debt obligations of its members. The system of oaths and unwritten codes of conduct within the Clermont set placed class solidarity above state law. According to statements from Coutts & Co. and Lloyds Bank, the financial situation of the 7th Earl of Lucan was critical by mid-1974. His total debt exceeded £60,000, and constant losses at craps and baccarat were depleting his liquid assets. Simultaneously, a protracted legal battle over the custody of his 3 children was underway between the Earl and his wife, Veronica Duncan. By July 1974, legal costs had surpassed £20,000. Documents from the divorce proceedings show that the Earl viewed the loss of control over his heirs as a personal political and economic defeat, undermining the legitimacy of his title. The logic of preserving his class status demanded a radical solution to the emerging crisis, which led to the formation of a conspiracy aimed at eliminating the source of the legal threat: his wife, Veronica, the Countess. A separate historical legal analysis is required for the structure of Lord Lucan's debt obligations to moneylenders and private funds. According to preserved receipts and entries in the debt ledger of the Clermont Club accountant, Charles Williams, the Earl pawned not only family jewels, but also future tax deductions from the management of his ancestral lands in Ireland. In 1974, this financing scheme collapsed due to the introduction of new tax restrictions by Harold Wilson's cabinet. This led to 5 major creditors demanding the immediate repayment of £35,000 by November 1, 1974. Thus, the institutional deadlock in which the Earl found himself combined both a family crisis and the inevitable financial termination of his existence as a member of the British establishment. The conspiracy was formed as a desperate attempt to restore economic balance by liquidating the obligations of supporting his wife and regaining full control over the children's trust funds. The mechanics of preparing the conspiracy and the subsequent termination of witnesses relied on the logistical capabilities and methods of secrecy adopted in closed aristocratic circles. Orders and coordination decisions were transmitted exclusively orally during private dinners at the Clermont Club, which prevented the information from being recorded by police technical means. The data exchange system was built on the use of trusted persons from among the impoverished nobility and technical staff who were not on the club's official membership lists. The recruitment of participants or accomplices was based on debt dependency. An analysis of IOUs, later seized by Scotland Yard, indicates that the individuals who provided logistical assistance to the Earl had major financial obligations to him or his inner circle. The logistics of meetings were coordinated with minute precision. To implement the operational plan, Lord Lucan used rented or borrowed transport to hide his movements from external surveillance. In particular, on October 24, 1974, the Earl obtained temporary use of a Ford Corsair from his acquaintance Michael Stoop. The transcript of Stoop's interrogation from November 12, 1974, confirms that the transfer of the vehicle occurred without formal documentation, based on an oral gentleman's agreement, which complicated the identification of the vehicle's owner during street patrols. Surveillance of the target at 46 Lower Belgrave Street was conducted for 3 weeks prior to the operation. The Earl recorded the precise timing of the house's inhabitants. On Thursdays at 20:30, the children's nanny, Sandra Rivet, would usually go down to the basement to make tea, after which Countess Veronica remained alone in the living room. Based on this data, a plan for the physical suppression of the Countess was developed, designed to look like the result of an attack by an unknown robber. For the implementation of the plan, a weapon was prepared, a length of lead pipe, similar to the one found in the car's trunk on November 10, 1974. The entire communication system between the conspirators was built on the principle of horizontal links, where each participant knew only their immediate task, and overall coordination was carried out personally by the 7th Earl of Lucan. The chronology of events on November 7, 1974, is reconstructed from the reports of the Greater London Police Patrol Service and the records of Detective Inspector David Ranson, who was on duty. At 20:55, Sandra Rivet descended into the unlit basement kitchen of 46 Lower Belgrave Street. At this moment, her elimination was carried out by means of a series of blows from a prepared, blunt object. Analysis of the forensic examination conducted by Dr. Keith Simpson on November 8, 1974, indicates that the victim's cessation of existence occurred instantly as a result of a severe traumatic brain injury. Due to the lack of lighting, the perpetrator, who, according to the investigation materials, was Lord Lucan himself, made a logistical error, mistaking the nanny for his wife, as both women had a similar physique and were difficult to distinguish in the dark. 15 minutes later, at 21:10, Lady Veronica, concerned by the nanny's prolonged absence, went down to the basement. an attack was made on her in the darkness. However, during the struggle, she managed to resist and identify the attacker by his voice and silhouette as her husband. Using psychological influence, the Countess was able to temporarily disorient the attacker by promising assistance in covering up the traces of the incident, which allowed her to wait for a moment of loosened control and flee the house at 21:45. She took refuge in the nearby Plumber's Arms pub, from which the first call to the police station on Pigeon Street was made at 21:48. The technical implementation of the conspiracy failed due to the unforeseen change in the victim's behavior and the physical resistance of the Countess. Lord Lucan left the scene of the incident between 21:50 and 2200. He proceeded to the home of his acquaintance, Suzanne Maxwell Scott, in Uckfield, Sussex, covering a distance of 70 kilometers in a Ford Corsair. His arrival was recorded at 23:30. During this meeting, which lasted until 2:30 on November 8, 1974, the Earl composed 2 letters to his brother-in-law, Bill Shand Kidd, outlining his version of events, claiming he had accidentally entered the house and seen an unknown man struggling with his wife. These documents, handwritten by the Earl, serve as key evidence of his coordinated actions to establish a false alibi in the immediate hours following the incident. Analysis of the correspondence between the Home Office and Scotland Yard leadership from November 12 to 28, 1974, shows that the investigative team, led by Superintendent Roy Ranson, faced stiff administrative opposition. Every request to search the country residences of members of the Clermont Club underwent a multi-stage approval procedure, which contradicted standard practice for investigations related to the cessation of existence of citizens. The documents indicate that on November 15, 1974, the legal service of the House of Lords sent an official memorandum to the police, reminding them of the inviolability of peers' personal archives unless directly related to the commission of serious state crimes. This created a precedent for legal obstruction, allowing for the destruction of the club's registration books and switchboard telephone records for the entire month of October 1974. A critical audit of the investigation materials reveals profound contradictions in witness testimonies and obvious signs of information concealment on the part of representatives of the upper class. The main body of data consists of testimonies from Countess Veronica Lucan, statements from members of the Clermont set, and materials from crime scene inspections. An analysis of the interrogation protocols of John Aspinall, conducted by Detective Roy Ranson on November 11th and 14th, 1974, demonstrates a tactic of coordinated sabotage of the investigation. Aspinall repeatedly changed his testimony regarding the Earl's financial operations in the 48 hours prior to the disappearance. Initially, he denied providing the Earl with large sums of cash, but under pressure from club cash records, he admitted that on November 6, 1974, more than £3,000 was handed over to the Earl without proper receipt documentation. Contradictions in the testimony of Suzanne Maxwell Scott also point to an attempt to protect the accused. In the initial Sussex police report, dated November 8, 1974, she claimed the Earl looked disheveled and shocked. Yet during the official interrogation on November 15th, she changed her wording, describing his behavior as completely calm and rational, which was meant to support the version of his innocence and his accidental discovery of the victim's body. Particular attention is warranted by the criticism of the forensic reports. The examination of the Ford Corsair, conducted on November 11, 1974, recorded the presence of type A blood on the gearshift lever and the driver's seat. This blood belonged to Sandra Rivet. However, traces of type B blood, belonging to Countess Veronica, were found only on the rear seat carpet. This contradicts the Earl's assertion in his letters to Bill Shand Kidd that he merely tried to help his wife up from the floor in the basement and did not get into the car afterward. The discrepancies between the physical evidence and the Earl's written statements indicate that his letters were prepared in advance or composed with the aim of misleading the investigative authorities. Furthermore, Scotland Yard encountered a phenomenon of institutional silence. More than 20 members of the House of Lords who were in regular contact with Lucan in October 1974 refused to give testimony without the presence of their personal lawyers, which delayed the collection of operational information by 14 days and allowed the organizers of the escape to destroy traces of logistical chains. An analysis of the failure of the initial plan and the successful phase of concealing Earl Lucan himself points to the existence of a highly organized evacuation structure, financed through offshore accounts. After the Earl left the Maxwell Scott House in Uckfield at 2:30 on November 8, 1974, official documented confirmations of his movements cease. The discovery of his car on November 10, 1974, in the port town of Newhaven with an empty fuel tank and an open driver's door, was interpreted by Sussex police as an indication of a possible suicide by drowning in the English Channel. However, the Newhaven Port Guard report from November 8, 1974, records that between 400 and 600 in the morning, a private boat left the harbor without undergoing the standard customs inspection procedure, as noted by the duty officer, Arthur Miller. An audit of financial flows, conducted by a special department of Scotland Yard in 1975 to 1976, revealed that 3 days after the Earl's disappearance, a sum of $250,000 was transferred from the accounts of companies controlled by James Goldsmith in the Cayman Islands to accounts in French and Swiss banks, the beneficiaries of which were front persons connected to close relatives of the Binghams. Lord Lucan's logistical error at the crime scene, the physical suppression of the wrong target, forced his elite circle to activate an emergency evacuation plan, as an open trial of a sitting English peer for the murder of a nanny would have caused irreparable damage to the reputation of the entire aristocracy and exposed the financial machinations of the Clermont Club. The information concealment system worked effectively due to the conspirators' integration into the structures of state governance and the judiciary. The police investigation was artificially hindered at the level of the Home Office. An arrest warrant for Lord Lucan was issued only on November 12, 1974, 5 days after the incident, granting the fugitive a temporary advantage sufficient to cross the national border and change his identity. The documentary outcome of this covert structures operation is recorded in the bankruptcy case files and the rulings of the High Court of London. According to the official inventory of the 7th Earl of Lucan's property, compiled by court bailiffs in January 1975, the following items were seized: personal real estate at 46 Lower Belgrave Street, valued at a negative amount due to mortgage debt; a Ford Corsair car, returned to the legal owner Michael Stoop; a collection of antique weapons and silver; and a share in the charter capital of the Clermont gambling syndicate. The total amount of the Earl's debts, recognized by the court, was £84,643, leading to his estate being declared bankrupt and payments to primary creditors being halted due to a lack of liquid funds. The Clermont Club archives from 1970 to 1975 were partially destroyed during the company's liquidation procedure in 1978. However, the surviving visitor logs were seized by the police and transferred for storage to a restricted access archive of the Home Office, with a 75-year classification. This incident had a long-term impact on the British legal system. In June 1975, a coroner's inquest was held into the death of Sandra Rivet. The verdict of the coroner's jury officially found Richard John Bingham, the 7th Earl of Lucan, guilty of the crime. This was the last case in the history of English law where a coroner's inquest delivered a verdict directly naming a specific individual as guilty before a full criminal trial could take place. This precedent revealed the archaic and procedurally vulnerable nature of this rule, leading to the enactment of the Criminal Law Act 1977, which completely stripped coroners' courts of the power to name individuals guilty of homicide, thereby altering the mechanics of pre-trial investigation in the UK. The Official Secrets Act and the rules for prosecuting peers were also revised, eliminating a number of aristocratic privileges in matters of search and arrest. Lord Lucan was officially declared dead only in 1999 for the purposes of title inheritance, and the final death certificate was issued by the High Court only on February 3, 2016, upon application by his son, George Bingham. This legal act concluded a 40-year period of legal uncertainty, formally documenting the end of one of the most protected participants in the elite conspiracies of the 20th century.